Welcome to the winter of Finland. The first snow has just fallen and I'm now walking in the middle of nowhere out to the forest to build a shelter. I do not have any tent with me, so I will have to build something where I can stay dry from potential snowfall. With me I have my sleeping bag and some sheepskins which I can use as a mattress. After crossing this swamp-like area, I find a good place to build a shelter. There's this half-fallen tree, which will be a perfect start for my shelter. Right now it's about -3 degrees Celsius here, so I'm staying pretty warm just with my wool sweater, and underneath I have another thinner wool sweater. I hope it's not gonna get too cold or too windy, because I do not have a jacket with me. The first thing I create is this mattress, using the branches from the fallen tree. Here I can sit comfortably when taking breaks from the work, so it's very practical to do this first. To save energy and get more of these small branches, which I can use for my roof, my walls and my mattress, I bring my larger pieces close to the shelter and clean them up here, so that all of the small twigs fall down where I need them. This will become a simple A-frame shelter with plenty of room on the inside, so I just stack a lot of these thicker branches on the side of the walls. When building something as simple as this, it doesn't matter if your branches or logs are a bit rotten. They're gonna be strong enough either way, because your building is so small, and you're gonna save a lot of energy because it's so easy to work with them. You can just cut them up with just a few chops if your axe is sharp enough. I notice the days are getting darker, the days are getting shorter, and I do not have that many hours remaining to build my shelter. I want to have some sort of a shelter before it gets dark. Luckily, I am able to build my shelter pretty quickly. because there's a lot of these dead branches and trees laying around. I actually chose this location for this reason. There's a lot of material laying around. This large log is gonna be one of the last pieces of the frame, and afterward I can start piling a lot of twigs onto the walls, so they're gonna be quite windproof and snowproof. Now the main part of the shelter, the frame, is complete, and before I continue building the walls, I go into the shelter to see if it's large enough, if it's comfortable. Then I take out my warm sheepskin and sit down, taking a break. With me I have some chocolate, some very dark chocolate, and honey. Honey is my favorite source of carbs, especially when I'm out on an adventure. Before I continue building the walls using a lot of twigs, I make sure that the shelter is really strong enough. I don't want to get any twigs or branches in my face when I'm sleeping. So this is the part where I gather a lot, and I mean very much, of these twigs. It doesn't matter what twigs I take, they can be dead, they can be all rotten, just anything I can throw onto my shelter, it's gonna help. This is a very simple step. I do not need to think, I simply need to do, and I like it. Now when I go inside the shelter, I notice that this is not thick enough at all. I can still see many holes in the wall, many gaps in the roof, and this is not gonna be comfortable. When the snow starts coming down, it's gonna come through the branches, and I simply need to keep working. I need much more branches, more than I think I would need. The layer needs to be very thick. Now that it's starting to get quite dark and very late, I decide that this is enough. This is gonna stop most of the snow, and now it is time to make a fireplace and get warm and cozy. To make a safe fireplace, I mean safe for the forest, I grabbed some stones which I found under fallen trees, under the roots of fallen trees, and then I put this under the fire. Something happened which I wasn't quite prepared for. The firewood was much wetter than I expected. I thought it wouldn't be so wet here, but I needed to spend at least 1 hour to get the fire going properly. The next morning it is snowing, but there is some moderate wind, and the temperature has risen a bit. It's about -1 degree Celsius, so I'm pretty warm, and I had a good night's sleep in my warm sleeping bag. Still, even though I slept well in my warm sleeping bag, I need to get the fire going again to be warm when I'm sitting and eating some breakfast. I have some tiny logs with me, which I also used yesterday to start the fire, but I didn't want to waste all of them, so I still have some remaining. Luckily, it's much easier to get the fire going now, because I have dry firewood. These large logs have been dried in the evening when I had the fire going. That's a very good thing to keep in mind, so if you have wet conditions, always keep some of the half-burnt logs for the next time. They're gonna be much drier than the ones you find laying around in the forest. The snow is coming down, but it's very light, and none of the snow actually is coming inside of the shelter, so my sleeping bag remained completely dry during the night, and now during the day I can sit down and relax and not get wet at all. That's the biggest danger when camping in winter. If you get wet, you're gonna get very cold. In my bag I find a huge piece of steak. I'm gonna cook it over the fire for several hours so it gets a good smoke flavor, and then at some point I can sit down and take a break and just enjoy the most delicious piece of meat. Every time I go camping and cook something over the fire, it's the most delicious thing I could imagine. So I have checked the weather forecast, and there's gonna be more snow in the night, so now is really the time I need to improve my shelter. I need more twigs and perhaps some longer walls so I can remain dry and enjoy my camping. There's this beautiful feeling of being completely alone in the forest, only hearing some birds, the wind in the trees, and for the most part complete silence. This is very magical, and I hope that you can also get out there in nature, because this is where we belong, this is where we can feel connected to the world and heal. But of course we also need to take care of our responsibilities in the modern world, so don't run away into the forest. That's not gonna make life better, perhaps for a while and only for yourself. Using these big branches, the fire keeps going a very long time, and I can work in peace while I know that my steak is getting cooked. Here I'd like to make a point about using live branches for building your shelter. You probably know by this point that live branches are much more effective when building a shelter, but here when I want to show this to people, this lifestyle of being out camping and building a lot of shelters, basically for making content and also for having fun. I do not want to wreck the forest, and I do not want to teach people to wreck the forest. So if you do this for recreational purposes, you should use mostly dead branches, but if you're in a real survival situation, I'd say you're free to wreck the forest if it saves your life. Use anything you can find. In between the work, I make sure to get a lot of breaks. One of my other favorite foods besides steak is dairy. This keeps me going for a very long time as it is so nutrient dense. So this is something you can bring along into the forest and transport and store it very easily. Unless it's very warm, then it's not gonna be so fresh. The steak is starting to look very good. It has been smoking here for hours, and it's somewhat cooked on the surface and raw on the inside, exactly how I want it. I was actually so minimalistic this time that I forgot to bring the knife, but I can use the axe for cutting the steak, there's no problem. What I need next is a lot of firewood, so I head out and grab some probably dry pieces of fallen trees and cut them up into firewood. Now that my shelter is pretty much complete, it's gonna protect me from all of the snow coming down, but I can make it a bit cozier, so I decide to take it to the next step. My plan is to grab some large logs to make a heat reflector on the other side of the fireplace. This is gonna provide more heat, more light, and also the firewood is gonna dry faster, because I can use the logs of the fire reflector as firewood later if necessary. They're gonna be very dry from the heat of the fire. I make the supporting pieces of this fire reflector a bit angled so that the wall is gonna carry itself by its own weight. And here I notice this is gonna become much more cozy and feel safer when I have more walls around me. This is important for when you want to relax at the fire and also to sleep well. If you have a safe location, you're gonna be in much deeper sleep. It's an amazing feeling to be here in the dark forest all alone. I am not afraid anymore, and here in Finland, in these parts, in the southern Finland, there are no dangerous animals to be afraid of, so I do not need to carry any spears or guns to feel safe. However, there are some bears and wolves in the area, but it's very rare to encounter these. They usually stay away from humans, but if I were to encounter one, I think I would be safe. I have my axe, I can hit them and they're just gonna run off. No, just kidding. A bear would wreck me. Now you'll see my cozy sleeping setup. I have this sheepskin, the sleeping bag, and also a pillow. I consider this acceptable cheating for a survival situation. What I pack with me in my bag doesn't make so much sense. I'm trying to feel as if I'm surviving, but then of course I do not want to have a tired neck when I wake up in the morning, so I bring a pillow, but I do not bring a sleeping mat. That is gonna make everything too easy. So when I have this sheepskin, I need to pile a lot of branches underneath, so they're gonna insulate even better. It's now late in the evening, it's completely dark, and more snow is starting to fall down. It's very cozy. On the third morning, I wake up in this magical winter wonderland. The snow has covered now almost all of the forest floor, so there's more light here, and it's very beautiful. Some birds are greeting me in the morning light, and then I start making my fire to warm up and have some breakfast once again. Today it was much easier to get the fire going because of all the extra dry firewood I have gathered and prepared yesterday. When camping and sleeping on the ground, especially in cold temperatures, the sheepskin or some mattresses tend to get a bit moist, so I make sure to keep it dry. I warm it on the fire and can actually place my sheepskin on top of my heat reflector. The sheepskin is simply amazing. I've used this particular sheepskin for over 3 years now, and it's still intact, it's still insulating very well, and also it's drying up very quickly if it gets wet or moist. After eating my breakfast in this beautiful forest, it is time to pack my things up. I can get everything into my bag except for the stuff I use for recording the videos, so my camera, my batteries, my tripods. There's a lot of things to carry when you shoot these videos, but generally you don't need to carry so many things to enjoy a nice camping trip. Even if you have a tent, you can get everything into your sleeping bag. This is a very simple hobby to get into. I very much recommend you to get out there in nature. Since there's so much forest here in Finland, and this forest is so far away from any civilization, I can simply leave my shelter here. Nobody's gonna notice it, nobody's gonna be bothered, and perhaps some animal can use this, and even some other camper can use this if they happen to stumble across it. This winter forest here is very easy to travel through. Since there's so little snow, there is no problem, there's no wet shoes, and I'm very much enjoying my return home in this wonderful sunny morning. I'm very happy you have watched this video and enjoyed it so far. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe and watch the next video. And as always, don't forget to get out there in nature. Goodbye.